Introducing Recorded Content, a podcast for small, scrappy B2B marketing teams who want to get the most out of podcasting. In each episode, we capture stories from industry experts and podcasters. Listen in and uncover what it takes to launch, run, and grow a successful B2B podcast. Check out and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Let's jump in.
Hey, I'm Tristan. I'm the co-founder of Motion and your host for this episode of Recorded Content. This show is brought to you by my company, Motion. We are a done-for-you podcast agency for small, scrappy B2B tech marketers. 2022 was a good year for this podcast. We released a new episode every single Monday. I personally learned a lot, and I tried some different things during the year too. So for this episode, I want to take a moment to cover 3 personal highlights from the past year. Hopefully, by sharing some of my own experiences, it will help inspire to interview, write, and produce your own podcast episodes every week. For my first highlight of 2022, I want to focus on how I landed one of my dream podcast guests. Now, every podcaster has a Mount Rushmore of guests. Maybe you want to interview your favorite celebrity. Maybe you wish you could have a conversation with your favorite athlete. For me, as a podcast host, one of the people I always wanted to interview was Andrew Warner. Andrew is the podcast host of Mixergy, and he's hosted over 2,100 episodes during a span of over more than 10 years. Mixergy is a podcast that uncovers stories from startups and up-and-coming entrepreneurs, and it's been a big inspiration for me in my entrepreneurial journey. I've listened to the show for years, long before I even owned a podcast agency. Here's how I got Andrew to be a guest on Recorded Content.
I tell other interviewers, look for motivated moments, for moments where people are eager to do an interview. Right now, I publish this book. I'm recording with you on a Tuesday because I published the book. I want people to know about it. And so I'm here to do it. And I'm saying, yes. If you would have asked me a year ago while I was writing the book, not only was I not motivated to get more attention for myself, but I was in the process of writing it. I did not want any distractions. You could be the full-on charmer doing everything. And I would say no. And if I somehow said yes, there'd be a part of me that resented you for robbing me of the time that I needed to spend writing the book. So you have to look for those motivated moments. One way to find a motivated moment is to look for authors who have upcoming books. You go into Amazon and you see the list of upcoming books and you know who is going to want promotion next month, because Amazon will tell you whose book is about to be published next month, and they're going to go and look for interview opportunities. Another way is, as you said, Product Hunt. Product Hunt is a place where people who publish new software want the world of technology and startup enthusiasts to go and find their software. And so I see them on Product Hunt. I see the people vote them on Product Hunt. I could go over to them and say, impressive that you've done so well. Let's talk about what you launched here on Product Hunt on my podcast. I want to hear about it. And they're in promotion mode anyway. They're more likely to say yes at that point. Versus if I talked to them a month before when they're getting ready for the launch, they'd say no. Look for motivated moments.
Some people would say I lucked out. But with Andrew, I found a motivating moment. I knew his book was recently launched, and so I took my shot to see if he'd come on the show. And after a few Twitter DMs, he joined me for a great conversation. Now for the second highlight, I'd like to talk about a different format I used with Recorded Content this year. And the format has nothing to do with being a podcast host. It's all about being a guest. I love being a podcast host, but one of the other things I enjoy about podcasting is being a guest. I love when other hosts ask interesting questions and they get me to think about things in a different way. I also love when hosts ask me to share some of my personal experiences, because I get an opportunity to take a step back and be a bit more analytical. Now, the one downside of being a guest is that the interview is highlighted on someone else's show. It's not a core part of your podcast. But it doesn't have to be this way. When you appear as a guest on another podcast, you can use this content and reshape it for your own show. Last year, I re-edited several interviews and included different segments in episodes for Recorded Content. I was able to use conversations I had with other podcast hosts to help the customers we have at Motion. One of the interesting conversations I repurposed was with Carrie Ann Benton-Stimson. I appeared as a guest on the Internal Marketing Show, and Carrie Ann guided a conversation around the emergence of private podcasts.
Can you give any sort of sense based on the conversations you've been having? why more companies are kind of jumping on the bandwagon, as it were, albeit slowly but surely?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that come to mind. First and foremost, that I think, we've been talking about it for a few years, but the pandemic did change the way that people are working these days. We have remote work is just really a common scenario for most organizations, and people are trying to determine how to increase engagement with employees, how to build relationships, how to just really connect with their employees on a human level. And a podcast really provides that capability. I mean, if you think about a podcast just with an external audience, it's really less about a one to many relationship. You're in someone's ear, and it's that really one to one connection. You're allowing your audience to come in as a fly on the wall. And so if you think about that concept and how useful that would be for a company, it really opens your eyes quite a bit. If you think about your company's leadership and getting their mission out there and getting buy-in from employees and how important that is, an internal podcast is a great way to do that because you have really that intimate connection to the company's leadership. And I don't really think there's any other kind of medium that equates to an internal podcast. As you can see, I had a unique opportunity to share some of my own experiences on another show. And this was a great way to shape an episode of our own podcast, Recorded Content. Your company's podcast doesn't have to be a series of one-to-one interviews each week. You can get creative with the formats and try new things. And repurposing podcast guest appearances was a big highlight for me last year. For the last key moment of 2022, I want to talk about a different style of interview I did. In most cases, companies book podcast guests and conduct a single interview. You identify a unique angle to the conversation and build out an episode from there. But there's a bigger opportunity available to companies. There's a bigger opportunity to tell stories over time. And that comes into play if you plan for a series of interviews. This past year, I planned a series of interviews with one of Motion's favorite technology partners, Descript. Each quarter, I featured members of Descript's team, and we covered the latest updates to their product. These conversations helped podcasters understand the changes in the product and covered how your podcast workflow can improve. And most importantly, this enabled listeners to get the inside scoop on why Descript was making certain changes and how other customers were adapting. So actually, Descript had a big announcement this week. So Harmony, maybe I'll start with you. Just tell me a little bit about what was the big news that dropped.
Absolutely. So it was our biggest redesign in the history of Descript. We were calling it Storyboard, and now it's just the new Descript, which is nice. So you're going to see a completely updated user interface, much cleaner, easier to just work from the script view, not have to go down into the timeline. So many new features, stock media libraries, templates, green screen effects, new video effects. So yeah, it's a whole thing.
Very cool. We'll get into some of the details that you mentioned, green screen being one of them. Before we do that, I wanted to talk about this big concept that's really folded into the latest release or the all new Descript, which is this concept of scenes. And Kevin, I was hoping maybe I'll kick it to you for this one. Like, what is the concept of a scene now that that's worked into Descript?
Scenes are this new way that we're imagining video editing. So instead of the standard timeline NLE editor with tons of clips and granular work in stacked clip view, we're breaking up a Descript project and video edit by scenes. So kind of like our combination of standard video editing, doc, and slides. So scenes are a way of chopping up your script, your video into sections, and organizing your visuals into these different card views. So you can group together visuals, adjust them, and manipulate them separately or as a group, and just have a nice organized view of your video.
The key thing with the interview series is that it wasn't a one and done conversation. I got an opportunity to build upon each conversation we had. I got a chance to ask deeper questions and learn more about Harmony and Kevin. And this series also led to an opportunity to join Descript's sounding board as a creator advisor. So I not only get a chance to connect with their team members on recorded content, but I also now get a chance to test and try new features before they're even made public. For me, 2022 was a year of what podcasting is really meant to be. It opened the doors to new relationships, it allowed me to try new things, and it kept me up to date in my industry. Well, that's all I have for today. I hope you'll continue to come back each week and follow along with our podcasting journey here at Motion. Thanks for joining me on Recorded Content. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Recorded Content, a show brought to you by Motion, a done-for-you podcasting agency for B2B tech marketers. We do the podcast stuff so you can focus on strategy, building brand awareness, and developing new relationships. To learn more about how you can launch and grow a podcast for your company, check out motionagency.io. Thanks for listening to Recorded Content.